Okay, and now I'm going to start with, we are being loaded in the boxcars. Thousands of people around me in the boxcars. At the end of the boxcars, I can't even see from one side or the other. That's how many there were there. And they started telling us, get in, fast, get in. And started to hit if you didn't go fast enough. And my dad was injured in World War I, so he couldn't move as fast as the younger was. And I was afraid that they're going to hit him, so I just went and helped him to get up on that thing because it was about this high on that boxcar. And when he was up and I was up, then they started to push even more people in until we were standing there like sardines. And they didn't give us anything. They didn't tell us where we're going. Just they only said we are being relocated. Where and why and what we're going to do. Just leave everything in your house. They said that to us at home yet. But anyhow, they packed us in this cars, and we are sitting on it, not knowing where we're going. They didn't give us anything to eat or to drink. There were no bathroom facilities on the train. And we are already in there for 4 days. And we are wondering, we still don't know what the next moment will bring for us. So we are very, very depressed, and it's very quiet at that moment. And even the children were quiet. All of a sudden, the train stopped. And that shocked all of us and scared us. We arrived obviously we arrived somewhere, but we didn't know where. Then they started opening the gates, and I heard a lot of shouting. I couldn't see out because the daylight blinded us. You know, it was so dark in those cars. And then the daylight, so for a few minutes, we couldn't see anything. But we could hear the SS was shouting, calling us all kinds of horrible names, which I didn't even know what it meant. And I was fluent in German at the time. And just raus, alles raus, ohne Pakete. And they kept on shouting it and shouting it. And meantime, they were pushing us and hitting us to move faster. So finally, we are getting out of the train. I helped my father to come down, and they were shouting, "Ohne Pakete." But my dad had a small briefcase with his prayer objects, with his prayer shawl, prayer book, and the thing that he used for everyday praying. And he grabbed for us. I didn't have a chance to tell him that leave it there, but he grabbed for it and he was holding it. That moment, an SS soldier.
Can you talk on this? Maybe it might be a little louder. Can everybody hear her? No. So.
Oh,
Well, it might be easier if you could
hold
stand
it
up.
for a minute.
How about we move the table this way, and you move over and get.
Or we can just get her to stand up here.
Stand up here?
She'd be better probably standing on the podium.
Excuse me, again.
You want to stand up here?
Can you step up?
Yes, I will.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
So this is working, okay. Okay, turn this around.
I don't know. Thank you.
Okay, talk to that.
Hello. And I have a voice. Did you hear anything what I said before? Okay. So we are out of the wagon, and my dad just grabbed that little briefcase and was holding it. And at that moment, I looked up, and there was the SS soldier running toward us. with a rifle butt up and started to hit my dad over his head. And he was hitting him over and over and over until blood was just gushing out. It was a terrible sight, and I'm standing there in shock. I don't know what to do. And my dad collapsed dead in the blood, in the beating, from the beating. And then the SS just motioned with his eyes to two of the other prisoners. And then they came over and they each grabbed my dad's one foot, and they were pulling him down on the uneven road, and his head was just bouncing up and down, leaving a bloody stream behind him. And they took him to a truck and just threw him on the truck, and I never saw him again. And I could I'm saying to the SS soldier, why did you have to kill him? He didn't do anything. And he lifted his rifle butt and looked at me and says, you want to go with him? And I just went and tried to get lost in the crowd because I didn't want to go. I didn't want to die. And then I was screaming and crying, and then I was hearing a voice, wake up, it's a nightmare, wake up. It's you're having the nightmare again. And I opened my eyes, and I was in my bed in Los Angeles. My husband was next to me there, and he said, you're having another nightmare, and I'm having that so often, and I'm screaming like this. It just was very hard to take for everybody around me and for me. And I was thinking then, I have to do something about this. And was figuring out something to do so that these nightmares would maybe stop. So I came to the conclusion that I have to write this down, because until then, I never spoke about it to anybody. I couldn't talk about it, never mentioned anything about a concentration camp when we came back. So I started to write, and each day I was so angry. I hated the whole world, I guess, because I was so frustrated and I was so almost vicious and saying things that I really didn't mean to. And then that made me a little bit to understand what the anger and hate can do, how it can change a person. And I thought, I'm going to write my story, and I'm going to put in the same thing what I felt, what the anger did to me. That I was shaking with anger, and I don't know what I would have done if I had an opportunity. But I just didn't want that. I wanted to talk about it. And I, in the morning, started to write, and with each page, as I completed each page, a weight came off of me. The anger, the hate, the frustration, the intolerance, they all seemed to come out of me. And I just couldn't type fast enough. But everything was on paper. And I thought, this will be good for my kids, for his kids, for their kids, and the world to know about it someday maybe. And that's what gave me a little light, and that gave me the strength to move on. And I thought, there is a lot of things we could do and should do. And I decided to do something on this point. And I started to go to schools and speak about it. And I opened myself up, seems like I opened myself up with writing that book. And I was able to paint a picture of to people who ever invited me to speak about it. Okay, Janice.
Okay, so I'm Dennis Judd. I'm Lillian's son. I'm a second generation Holocaust survivor. As I grew up, the stories of what happened with my parents in the concentration camps were never really spoken about. It was something that was kept quiet to a large extent. Growing up as a child, at the age of my son, we would ask, Mom, why do you have tattoos on your arms? Or Dad, why do you have tattoos on your arms? I said, well, we got those when we were in the camps. Why do my neighbors have grandparents? Why do I never have? Where are my grandparents? Well, they were killed in the camps. There's a whole aspect of growing up. I felt like I was a normal, typical American, and then at the same time realized that there were additional pieces of life that carried through my parents. It was kind of like their silence, the deafening silence of what happened and why are these things different than other families or other kids. In any case, as my mom started writing more of her stories, it started to come out, and so she was able to talk about it, and I could see it healing her. She's transitioned into a different person now than she was as I was growing up. She's more at ease, more kinder, more tolerant, and I'm trying to learn from that. One of the interesting things was, as we were talking, actually, they moved up to Oakmont, and I came to visit them, my parents. This is before the stories in the book were put together, and she'd gotten a brochure from the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and it had a photograph of Hungarian Jews arriving at Auschwitz. And it was like, that's the first photographs I had seen from Auschwitz that were taken. And she said, this is a picture of me and my mother and my sisters right after we got off the train. And I was looking at that, and I couldn't recognize my mom because she looked different than how she looked to me at that point. But there was a photograph that was also had been sent to the United States to her uncles that showed the family right before they were taken away to the camps. And I could see the direct resemblance of the faces and realized that, this was a train load. This is like the one time that the Nazis took photographs of Jews arriving at Auschwitz. It was one train load. It happened to be the train load coming from Ungvar, or the Carpathian Rus, where my mom was from. It happened to be the train that my mom was on, and it happened to actually have the photographs of my mother's family right after the Nazi SS soldiers killed my grandfather. So to an extent, that kind of told me that there must have been a reason for this, and maybe it is to get the story out and to show that we can show the documentation, the proof with the photographs that this did happen. Another thing that happened while we were putting the book together is we were able to track down, because the records are finally released, the logs that the Germans kept. The Nazis kept meticulous logs of their prisoners because they would have them stand for roll call for hours at a time in the cold and in the snow, and they count them over and over and over again. And they actually kept records of them. So we could tell from the records that when my mom arrived at Auschwitz, how long she stayed there, when she was transported to Bergen-Belsen, how long she stayed there, and then when she was transported ultimately to Flossenburg. And that was a camp that she didn't even know the name of it. She was basically sent to labor for factory labor, and that was the camp where it was tied into it before the death march. So there's some more photos, documentation. So here is the family just as they got off the train. So what I was going to do is have my mom talk a little bit more about what happened to her as she was running away from that Nazi SS soldier who just killed her father. So maybe you can tell a little bit about that.
Yes, as I was just pushing myself away from him. I wanted to put a distance, but So I pushed myself between the crowd and kind of went to look for my mom and my sisters. I found my mom and I found my sisters. In the meantime, while he was busy killing my dad, they separated the men from the women. And there were only women there left. The men were taken away. And we had to stand in line of 5. And Mom was on the edge, and she was seeing ahead, like what's happening ahead. And there she says, they are separating us. If they take any one of you away from me, I'm as good as dead. And she's crying, and I have nothing to say. I don't know what to say. I can't console her because I needed somebody to put their arms around me and say that everything is someday going to be okay. But there was no one. So then as we go on slowly, step by step, because there was no room, I saw also, when we came closer, the angel of death, the doctor of death, that he was called Dr. Joseph Mengele. And he was just standing there in a beautiful white uniform with white gloves and just pointing. And to the right, you live. To the left, you die. Go in the gas. And and I look at my mom, and she's still crying. And just before it came to us, I said to my sister, Renee, please pull yourself down a little bit so that you could go with Mom.
But at that time, you didn't know that there was to the right you live, to the left you die. You know that now.
Well,
at that time, you didn't know what was going on.
But they were separating us. And for my mom, it was enough to be separated. That's what she was scared of at that point. I'm sorry, I mix up or I forget something. Anyway, the separation was completed as far as we were concerned. I looked back and I was looking after them to say goodbye, but they were already turned around the corner and we couldn't see each other anymore. So I couldn't even say goodbye to them. And they were pushing us forward, and we were moving also 5 to a row forward, and they hollering, if you have any valuables or money, give it up, give it to us, because if we find it on you, it will be very, very bad for you. And they kept on saying these intimidating things to us, and we were scared anyhow. We were so scared, we didn't know what brings the next second. And we were shivering, and we were just moving because they were pushing us or would hit us if we didn't. And we just, I saw that people were throwing away money, rather money, into the ditch, and jewelry. I didn't have anything, so I didn't have nothing to throw away or keep. So we were walking, we came to a big building, gray building, and I see that 5 people are let in at a time. They go in, but no one ever comes out. So I couldn't figure out what that meant. So when our turn came, we walked into a big hall. And we looked down the floor, and it was covered with hair, thickly covered with hair. And it was different colors and different shades. And we were wondering, where is it coming from? And there I saw 5 or 6 SS men standing and telling each other jokes and laughing out loud. And I'm waiting for them. They're still hollering. Take everything off. Take all your clothes off. And I'm just not moving. There are some men. I'm not going to undress in front of the men. So I'm waiting for them to leave. They didn't move. So the girls, the helpers came and started to pull my clothes down. I had my best clothes on. They pulled my coat and threw it on the floor. And they pulled on my dress off, everything off until I was naked and very, very embarrassed. Then they pushed me into a chair. And then I look up and I see a woman coming toward me with something shiny in her hands. I wondered what it was. But not long, didn't have too much time to think about it, because in the next second, she put that thing next to my hair and started to shave my head with it, so it must have been a shaver. And I grabbed her hand. I said, "What do you think you're doing?" And she said, "Just be quiet." And they took my hand away and continued, "Just be quiet." And they shaved my hair completely and everywhere, and all of our hairs from all our bodies and everywhere. And they gave us a little piece of something that they call soap, which I don't think ever was soap. It looked like a rock and it felt like one. And they said, "Go into the next room." And I go into the next room, and I'm standing there and I'm looking up at the ceiling, and I see their faucets. And I'm waiting, and my sister walks in, and she was shaved also, and we didn't have a chance to see ourselves, but I saw her, so I could imagine how I looked too, because she was a very cute, pretty little girl, and she looked terrible without hair and clothes. And I figured that's how I look. So we were crying our hearts out, but the water started to run on us, cold, ice cold water, and which shocked us at first. But then we started to wash ourselves, because we weren't washed for 4 nights and 4 days, so we needed it. And all of a sudden the water stopped. They didn't give us towels or anything, but they pushed us outside, wet, and it was so cold out in Poland that it was unbearable. I thought that even my bones froze. And we were standing there for hours because they kept on counting us and recounting us. Finally, they said, "Now you can go in, you get some clothes." So we go in, and I see there's some long, as I walk into another hall, long tables, and they were all loaded. One was with eyeglasses, children's and grown-ups, and one was loaded with children's shoes, and the third one was loaded with dentures. And they all had something shiny in it, and that's why they were there. So I figured, how do they take the glasses away so you can still exist? They take your shoes away, you manage. But for the old people, they take the dentures. They can't possibly eat. They can manage. And if somebody would have told me that they don't have to worry about it, they're dead, I would choose not to believe it, probably. I didn't know, and we went back, and they gave me a mini skirt, no underwear, no stockings, and a short-sleeve blouse. So it didn't help my being cold. I was still cold. And then they took us further, and they took us to the campgrounds, and there were the barracks there, and in front of one barrack, a bunch of girls broke through the door, and they all had black hair and long hair and nice clothes, and they ran toward us, and they were hollering, go back, you came here to take our place away, go back." We thought we can't go back, but that's how they felt, that we came there to take their place. Well, they were pushed back by the Nazis, to the barrack, and we were taken to another barrack. And there we had to wait again until the block supervisor comes in and claims us. And we saw there a big, like here, the garbage cans, full of some kind of stuff. It looked terrible, and some kind of mush. And we thought, oh, one girl even said, we're going to work here. There is the food for the animals we're going to feed. We're still standing there. I was looking up and saw a small window, glass window that were mirroring us. And I'm looking up and I couldn't find which monkey was I, because we all looked like monkeys. And I couldn't find myself, so I went like this, and then I could identify myself. And then I started to cry because I really looked like a monkey, and worse. So we cry. Meantime, the block supervisor comes to claim us, and we have to walk in. And we walk in into a barrack, huge barrack, and there were bunk bed structures, five layers to a structure, 5 people to one bed, to one layer. So 25 people in one structure, and there were hundreds there. So when we were all placed, they wanted us to eat. And what do you think they brought in? The barrel, the garbage can of mush. And they wanted to feed it to us. That first night, none of us wanted it. Nobody wanted to have it. I said, the block supervisor says, okay, if you don't want it, it's okay. Go to sleep. And we were pushed into our bunk beds, and we were there maybe 5 minutes, and everybody jumped up and ran to the gates. And the block supervisor comes out and says, where do you think you're going? What you doing? And we say, we want to see our family. And she says, you can't. And they pushed us back into the bed. But in another 10 minutes, we all jumped up, like somebody would close in or something, but we just couldn't sit there, and just all jumped up and ran toward the gate again. But this time she came out from her office and she says, okay, you want to see your family? And we said, yes. And we were so pleased and happy that she got changed in her heart. And she was willing to bring us to our family. But then she opened the gate, and it was dark outside already. But the sky was red, a very vivid red. And the smell, when they burn living people, living bodies, the smell is unbearable and very nauseating. I was getting sick. And then she said, I still didn't know what was going on. And then she says, you want to see your families? And we said, yes. And she goes like this, there they are, burning. And I believed them. I believed her at that time. The smell, the redness, and that she opened the gate, I believed. So we started to cry. They didn't have to force us to the bed. We just walked in and lay down and cried all night. I never knew I had that many tears. And we were in Auschwitz. In the morning, they woke us up at 4 or 4:30. And we had to stand Zählapper. We're standing there for hours, and nobody's allowed to move because she's watching it. And if anybody moved, then she came over and beat them up. But there were people that couldn't take the heat, the cold so much, and they weren't as young as I was or the other or my sisters, and they couldn't hold their bladder, and they let go. And when that was seen, then they get the most brutal beating and kicking from these girls. And that was our first day there. And then they gave us a tiny little piece of bread. It was moldy. And by then we were pretty hungry because we didn't eat anything all day the day before in our night, so we were hungry. So how are we going to eat this? And then they gave us coffee. Coffee that never even smelled coffee. They never even put in any coffee. But it was black and it was hot. And it felt good going down. Finally, they said, now you go back into the cabin. And they take us here, and there was nothing. They had nothing for us to do. They didn't prepare any work or anything. So they had to occupy us, so they took us out and gave us small children's hammers and some small rocks. And we were supposed to hit it until it gets powdered. And we couldn't do that because it jumped off. It always hit somebody in the face, and then we just gave it up. We couldn't do nothing with it. And this is how they wasted our life and time for that day. And the next day, it wasn't much better. Until later, they put us to work into a Weberei. They called it a Weberei, but we didn't Weberei. Weberei is what's it called? Where they make cloths weaving. But we didn't weave anything. They didn't give us. We couldn't do it. So they put us into another room where they gave us a lot of beautiful material, like very beautiful brocade bedspreads and draperies. And the order was that we had a scissor, and they had some long tables and chairs. And in front of every chair there was a nail hit into the table. And you had to sit there, make a knot of those materials that you cut up, and braid it like you would braid your hair. And then roll it into a ball. And every day they gave us orders. We had to have so many meters rolled into a ball. And that's what we were doing, destroying beautiful stuff and making nothing. I don't know if they ever used those things or not, but I don't think so. We were doing this, and it's already for months, and there is a lady who was there with, I'm sorry, I can't move away. That was there with 3 daughters, and she was lucky, and they chose her to that side. Yeah.
Want some water?
Is there a way to turn the volume? I don't know.
Is there a volume? Do you want to sit also?
Try it.
Okay.
Hello?
Is that better?
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you. That's where I was. Thank you. So this lady says So she was very grateful to God that her daughters were with her, which was a terrific deal, beautiful. She says, kids, Yom Kippur is coming up very soon. Yom Kippur, in case who doesn't know, is the biggest Jewish holiday in the year. And that no matter how we felt, how strong was our faith, Yom Kippur was always held. So she says, let's make enough of this, another bundle for that day, so we wouldn't have to work. We would just pretend to work. And let's just not eat that day. So we could arrange that. We didn't get much to eat, so we could arrange that they would hoard it for us. We prepared. Even I was very slow on this, and I had a hard time making the quota for each day. But to make an extra quota, that was very impossible. But I did it. By the time Yom Kippur came, I had my bundle, just like everybody else. And we went to the block supervisor, and she said, and we said to her, would you please mind to give us the little bread in the evening instead of morning? And she said, I wouldn't mind, but why? And we told her that it's Yom Kippur and we're going to fast. And she says, you're crazy. You're fasting all year. What you eat is like fasting. She was right. But we were determined, and we asked her to keep the coffee and the bread. We didn't eat nothing. We go to work, and we covered the bundles so that the couple wouldn't see it. Couple is a person who was watching over us and beating us up when she thought it was necessary. And so we were afraid of her. And then we just put down the scissors in so that we would be cutting, and otherwise we were pretending to work. And she somehow noticed it, the couple. And she came to the girl, two chairs away from me, and she started to look, and she found the bundle. And she says, what are you guys trying to do? You're going to kill me. And then she started to beat that girl over the head so hard that I thought she's going to die there. But then she went to the next girl, and she did the same thing, found the bundle, and started to beat her. And then she came to me in the same situation and beat me over the head. For years, I had headaches even when I came home. And she was just didn't give up. And I just prayed to God, God, why? What am I doing now? I'm obeying your commandments. Why do you let this happen to us now? Just please, at least, make her tired before she comes to my sister. Because my sister was two or three chairs down. So that she couldn't at least beat up on her. And you know what? She beat me up and she said, I don't know, you're killing me. I can't even breathe. I don't even have my lungs anymore. And you are doing this to me. She's beating us up and she's blaming us. Anyways, she stopped and God listened to me. And my sister was not beat up. So I was grateful for that. In spite of that, I wasn't believing anymore as I did a day before. Because why should this happen to us? But it did. Now we are. Now the day is over, and I am completely a different person. I don't I don't believe anything. I don't know. Why am I here? Why am I beaten up on Yom Kippur? Because I'm trying to fast and not to work. And so on.
I guess I think at this time I just wanted to see if there's anybody had any questions before Mom goes into another part of her story. If there's any questions that we can answer. Yes?
I'm just curious, which year were you sent to the camp?
What year were you sent to the camps?
In 1944.
Yes.
How old were you at the time?
How old were you at the time?
About 17, 18, maybe 19. I didn't keep track of my birthdays that time.
Yeah, I believe she was about 19 or so. Okay, so do you want to go into the story of how you were liberated, or give a brief overview, and then we can ask you more questions?
So we were in Auschwitz for a year. And then they decided to transport us to another someplace. They took us the same way with those boxcars to someplace else. We arrived someplace where it says, "Welcome to Belsenbergen." It was a filthy place. And we walked in, and there was no place to go because the buildings were overcrowded. They had no room for us. And they just pointed out on the cement, on the ground, a piece of land, and said, "Sit down here, and this is where you're going to be." And then somebody brings a little straw, and I'm going to grab it to pull it toward us, because I was very sick by then with a bladder infection, and I was in terrible pain. And I wanted to grab the straw, but someone that was stronger than I grabbed it from the other side. And I ended up with a handful of straw. So our group did not have straw. And it was cold. And they did the same thing with our soup. A group of girls went to get the soup, and the stronger ones attacked them and took out the soup. And they came back, and there was hardly any watery soup in the can. And then we befriended, I was there with my sister, and we befriended other two sisters, and we were kind of hanging around together. And I said to them, "I have to get out of here. I'm going to get out of here." And they all looked at me like she went crazy. And I would, what else can I expect? And they say, "How are you going to manage it?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know yet. But I have to get out of here, or I'll die here. And I don't want to die here after what I suffered in Auschwitz." And you know what? The next morning, there was nothing to do, so we went for a walk, 4 of us. And we just walk a little bit, and we see that there is a civilian gentleman selecting people. There are women standing there, and he's selecting for something, picking out whoever he wanted for work. I don't know what he was looking for, but I said, this is the opportunity we have. And the other girl says, "How do you know it's not going to be worse than this?" I said, nothing can be worse than this. And I was so right, but it was just an instinct. I didn't know it. But that camp, most of them died there in typhus, because typhus broke out there. So we went into the line, into the selection line, and he took my sister and the other two sisters, sent them this way. Came to me, he sends me that way. Now, I was the one who wanted to get out, and he's sending me back. So slowly I'm pushing myself back, sneakily, And I thought maybe he won't notice that I go to the other side. You know, and he says, "Oh, didn't I tell you to go to that side?" And I look at him and I say, "Yes, you did. But my sister you sent over there." And he says, "Your sister? Okay, you go there too." That was one of the few nice, beautiful things, life-saving things that was done to me by a Nazi. I don't know if he was a Nazi, by a German or an SS or something. And he, by his choice, he let me go to the other side. Even we were taken to a factory from there. And we were given beautiful treatment. And they said, "We're going to treat you like human beings, so act like such." We didn't know how. We didn't know how to do that anymore. We were doing terrible things. We had a condo, and we had a bed, just two people in the bed, and we had bathrooms, and they gave us every week clean clothes, and they brought us food from outside, from the restaurant, and they talked to us, and we worked 2 shifts, night shift and day shift, and they were really very, very, very nice to us. Well, we weren't there very long because the Allies were coming closer and closer, and we had to evacuate. They evacuated us from there, from that factory, which was the nicest place we were while in the camps. And they took us to another building where there were Hitler emptied the jails, and the criminals were there, and they were over us, and they were doing terrible things to us. But they said to us, "The morning you're going to get some warm coats and sweaters." And so we did get the coats and the sweaters, and which was good because we were cold. And one man was standing in the back and was painted with a big brush and black paint, and on every coat, every one of us painted in the back and on our backs, KL, a big KL, Konzentrationslager. So we were marked again. I forgot something. When we arrived to Auschwitz, they also tattooed us. And that I still have. So if you want to see it, you can come down and I'll show it to you. And then from that place in the morning, when we got the jackets and they were marked, they gave us a blanket and they gave us a bigger piece of bread. And that's how our death march started. And we started out with 1,250 women, and we were marching and marching for weeks. The first day it was raining, and our blanket was soaked, and we didn't have her to sleep, so she made us sleep on the floor, on the ground. So my sister had a blanket, and I had a blanket. So we put on the floor, on the ground, and we lay down, and the other one we covered ourselves with. In the morning, it was frozen. I don't know how were we able to get up and move on, and didn't even catch a cold. So I saw God's hands in it. And somehow, the way I thought I had reasons to be unfaithful or because of the Yom Kippur happenings, these little things brought me back. Every day that something happens, that it could have been different, and we are still alive. So that's God's will. And we were marching and marching, and here and there, some farmer let us sleep in their barn, and gave us something, maybe some soup to eat. But we were marching for a long time. And not only that we didn't know where we were going, the SS didn't either, because they couldn't get where they were supposed to go. They were supposed to take us someplace that they kill us. But there were no place anymore left, because they destroyed the places where they were killing the people before and burning. And we were marching until we were several weeks on the road already. And the SS, I saw the SS made a circle there by themselves, and they were whispering something into themselves. And then all of a sudden they parted, and they were hollering, because we were marching on a paved road, and on each side there was thick forest. And they started to shout, "Run, run!" Where are we running? We were afraid to run. We were afraid to do anything anymore. But when one of the SS came toward me and my sister with the rifle butt up, I grabbed my sister's hand and jumped into the forest and was running. I didn't look who came after us or what. And we were running and running. I don't know where we got the energy, but we were running until we came to a clearance. There I saw a man working, so we came out of the clearance and I asked him in German if he would give us something to eat. So he says, "I only have milk and bread. That's all I have left." We said, "Oh, that would be great. We didn't have milk since we left home. We didn't have bread. Good bread for since then either." So he fed us, and I looked behind me. There were about 16, 18 people behind me that we were all running together, and he fed everyone. And then I asked him, "Would you please tell us, what part of the world are we in here?" Because I had no idea. He says, "You're in the Sudetenland. This is the Sudetenland." Sudetenland, that was part of Czechoslovakia, my country. And then I started to talk to him Czech, and he answered me. And the girls said behind me, "Ask him if he would let us work for free for him, just for food." And I asked him that in Czech, and he says, "You don't have to anymore. The war is over." That's the first time we heard that the war was over. And he says, "You can go home. The Germans lost. So go home." It's easier said than done, because the Sudetenland was very far from Užhorod, where I come from. And we didn't have any money, so how were we going to get home? But with the showing our numbers, the railroad station gave us passes to go from one place. But then the railroad was bombed, and we had to, the train couldn't go, and we had to go get out and walk to the next place that the rain would start. And it took months before we got home. And we are still so timid that we went to beg for food. I looked terrible. We were covered with lice. We had no place to wash up or to clean up. And I was always starved, always asking for food, and offered to work for it. But they didn't want any part of me, I guess. I was so skinny. I weighed 70 pounds. 70 pounds. And the clothes that I was dressed in was raggedy, dirty. So we were just doing what we could until we got home. And then we came home. I made myself a thing that my mom is going to survive and she will be waiting for us. And we came home, mother wasn't there, and my sister knocked on the door on our house. Nobody opened it. And we were sitting there and crying. Finally somebody hollered out in a very cruel voice, "You go away. This is not your home anymore. This is my house now." The Russians occupied that part of Czechoslovakia and gave out to Russian people the Jewish properties. And they subdivided it and built on it and lived there. And they wouldn't move. Anyhow, that was our homecoming. But when I said, "God, why did I survive? I have no hope. I don't know what we're gonna do. Mother didn't come home. They didn't let us. They don't want to let us in our house. What is it? Why did we come home?" And then I look up, and this lady coming from across the street, a neighbor, and she says, "Come, kids, come to my house. I'll take care of you." And that was our lucky part. And she did keep us until we were able to go and do for ourselves. She helped us clean up and all that. And then it's a new life. After a long time, I was already an adult chronologically, but in my head I still was a little girl who couldn't function and couldn't understand why all this happened. And
In working on the book, I put together a portion coming from the second generation, and part of what I was looking at was through all of the atrocities that went on, through all of the insanity that was going on with the Holocaust, that ultimately it still came down to the individual, because there were individuals that made the difference in my mom's life. There was individuals that treated her super cruel, more cruel than they had to, from the SS guard that killed my grandfather. He didn't have to do that, but he did it. And then at the same time, there were stories that she's, has in her book where her and her sister used to sneak out from the barrack in Auschwitz because there was a faucet nearby that just had drips of water coming down, and they would sneak out early in the morning while it was still dark to try to wash with the drips of water. And one time while they're doing that, an SS officer caught them. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And they looked up, they thought they were going to get killed for sure. And they said they just came for the water to try to wash. And the SS officer looked at them and he said, "It's very good that you're doing that. You need to be very careful, but trying to keep clean is going to help you survive." And he walked on. And I thought, here's an SS officer who had kindness and compassion, who showed it when he could have just shot him and killed him, and the system would have said it was okay. And yet, at the same time, was another SS officer that killed my grandfather. So in the same institution, under the same similar conditions, the individual could make the difference. And that's important to realize as we go forward in our lives, that as individuals, we all can make the difference, be it nice, be it caring, or be it being mean and ruthless. And that was something that I've come across with. I think I've also had to come across the teachings of my mom as far as hatred and anger, which I'm still working on. But it was time for me to start to learn to forgive, and I had to go through that process to basically, on my behalf, to forgive the second generation of Germans, which I had never done before. I didn't want to have anything to do with Germany, because the second generation, they were not responsible for what happened during their previous generation. And it was interesting, as we were going forward with the book, we were in Hawaii, and my mom had fallen down, and she had needed to get some x-rays, and we're at Kaiser, and the lady's giving her x-rays, and they're looking, And as she's doing that, she noticed my mom's numbers, and she came back and she started kind of shaking, this lady. And I was like, what's going on here? And she's just kind of trembling. And then she walks back to my mom, and she's in tears, crying and asking for forgiveness. And it's like, what's going on? And it's like, her great uncle was one of Hitler's advisors. And so she just felt terrible, and she was like responsible. And I was proud of my mom saying that, you weren't even born then. It's not, you didn't do anything wrong. But so there's a level of forgiveness, I guess, that as a second generation I've had to learn to give too. And it's been an interesting process as we go through it. Are there any questions that anybody has? Any more questions? Yes.
You said your homeland was in Poland?
Everything was taken away from me. When I went to my property we were chased away. And I just didn't feel home there, and I just thought, I have to find another home. And then in the Sudeten, they offered for the survivors help, and we all went there. And from there, we came to America.
Basically, she still stayed in Czechoslovakia, but she moved to the Sudetenland, which was separate from the Užhorod area. Užhorod was a part of Czechoslovakia that the Russians just basically chopped right off of Czechoslovakia. And after World War II, it did not exist as part of Czechoslovakia anymore. And so, and it wasn't for about 2-3 years. My brother was born at the time. My mom got married and had my brother. That the Russians started coming into the Sudetenland looking for any Jews that had left the Ungvar area because they wanted to bring them back. That's when they realized it was time to get out of Europe at all and get back and come to the United States.
Craig, would you clear the screen, please?
Any other questions? Yes.
When you came to the United States, what year was that and where did you move to?
When you came to the United States, what year was it and where did you move to?
It's 1949, February, and first we went to our uncle and stayed in New York for a week visiting. Then we went to visit my husband's uncles in McKeesport, and then we went to Detroit to my uncle and stayed there 2 weeks. And then we came to Southern California because my brother and sister were there already waiting.
Your brother had gone ahead before the war, right?
Yeah.
Right. My Uncle Leonard, my mom's brother, had gotten out of Europe. It was on the last ship that was allowed to leave from France, where he was allowed to leave as a Jew. So his passport has a swastika stamped in it because the Nazis had already taken over that part of France. And he ended up joining the U.S. Army and fighting for the U.S. In Africa and then in Europe. Any other questions? Yes.
So, of your immediate family, it was just you, your sister, and your brother who survived the war?
Of your immediate family, it was just you, your sister, and your brother that survived the war.
Yes. And my sister died about 12 years ago, 11 years. And my brother died about 6 years ago. So now I'm all by myself. I mean, my son is here too. And his family. And that's a blessing to me, for me. Anything else? Yes?
Was your husband also a camp survivor?
Yes. He was many long years in the forced labor camp before they took him to Auschwitz, and then Buchenwald, and then the Death March.
He was in the Czech army when Czechoslovakia was independent, and then when England let Czechoslovakia be taken over by the Germans took over the army, and they took all of the Jewish soldiers out and put them in forced labor camps. Basically, everybody, when they reached a certain age, had to be in the army. So by doing that, they took all of the men that could have fought or could have put up resistance, and they had them in forced labor camps. So the only people left home would have been the children, the women, and the elders. Any other questions? Yes.
How long after you came here to the United States did you say that you started to write? How long did it take you to start writing?
How long did it take you to start writing your book?
I never figured it out. And when this nightmare came to me, and then I felt that I had to. But I don't even know how long was I here already then.
It was probably in the 1980s when she started writing.
About 30 years.
And then the book's been in the works for about 20 years. The last 10 years I've been pushing hard on it, with a real hard push the last year. And we're real happy and proud to have finally pulled the book together. So, because she's been giving so many talks over these past 20 years, and everyone's asking, when's your book going to be ready? And now we can finally say it's ready, and we're very proud of it.
Dennis brought copies for you. And you'll be able to buy one and get it signed by Lillian.
Yeah, so we have books available here, or else you can also get them on going through our website, and there's a special discount code for the students here, so you get a special deal. Any other questions? Yes?
Can you tell us a little bit about your life before Auschwitz? Life in the ghetto, what kind of struggles did you have before you were in Auschwitz?
Can you tell about your life before Auschwitz a little bit? Probably just a brief, and then how it was in the ghetto.
Well, that's another long story. Before I grew up, I went to school, and I grew up in a religious family, and my father was a butcher, and we lived mostly off the things that we grew on our land, and until the time came that they started to act, the anti-Semitism was very big then too, but we weren't afraid as much as we were after Hitler came, after the Hungarians occupied us. And we went dancing at times, the young kids, the young people, until some jerk stood up on a box and said, "Jews out." So then we went out, because they outnumbered us anyhow. But and we were not a fighting type, so we all went out and never went back there again. But we found ourselves other ways to entertain ourselves, and it was possible. We had a lot of Czech friends, and the old neighborhood kind of changed. There were a lot of people that informed on us. Not a lot, but some. And a lot of young kids were taken to jail and beaten. And that was after Hitler, of course. And life was hard. We didn't have water, we didn't have hot water in the house, or electricity, or we had a pump outside. And that's about it.
They were taken to the ghetto. There was a ghetto that was set up in Ungvar at the brick factory, and so the families all the Jewish families were taken to that. I don't think you stayed there more than a number of weeks, 6 weeks or so. And then from there, they were being herded out into the rail cars where she explained the story. So, yeah, it was about 6 weeks worth of a ghetto in Uzhhorod, and that took care of all the Jews from the Carpathian Mountains. They were all brought to that spot. Mom says that it's all described in the book. It's great.